Okay, tonight is my great pleasure to reintroduce Dr. Kaytlin Ahern, who has spoken to us a couple of years ago, I guess now.
Yeah, 2021.
21, okay, you got the, I didn't remember exactly when it was. Anyway, she has been working off and on in the Maya area, and she's going to talk about some of the neat stuff she's found there tonight. She's talking about the Maya city of Cival in Guatemala, and I think she's probably going to tell you more about it than I can confuse you with. But anyway, she has her doctorate from the University of Buffalo and has been working since 2021 as an archaeologist with New South Associates down in Stone Mountain. She's got over 10 years of experience in survey, testing, data recovery, artifact, all the general archaeological experience, and has worked in Belize, Guatemala, Georgia, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina. She's also currently secretary of the Society of Georgia Archaeology, which is our state archaeological organization. We are a chapter of that society here. And she's also the president of the Gwinnett Archaeological Research Society, called GARS, and that is another chapter of SGA. So you're holding two. That's great. That's fantastic. And so I'd like to welcome Kaytlin Ahern.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Well, he'll tell you if you're not there.
So Bragg is a much cooler name than GARS. GARS is Gwinnett Archaeological Research Society. Bragg is got guild at the end, which is much neater than a society. If you're interested in ever doing field work, send an email to Manny and get some information about GARS, because GARS does do, at least once or twice a year, we try to do some sort of public outreach that gets students to do field work. Okay, cool. So my name is Kaytlin Ahern, and I currently work at New South Associates. During graduate school, I spent several summers down in Guatemala studying the ancient Maya, the Home Wall Archaeological Project run by Francisco Estranavele. Today, I'll be discussing a series of excavations conducted at the pre-classic period Maya site of Cival. So not this one, but one of my excavations actually made it on National Geographic, which is really cool. And there's a lot of fun stuff that gets done in the Maya region that gets put onto National Geographic. So if you're ever interested in more stuff on the Maya, National Geographic's a great source for it. I now work as an archaeologist at a local CRM firm. So cultural resource management, I get sent on projects throughout the state and get to see some pretty cool stuff. Okay, so to switch to my paper, this is actually associated with an article that should be published real soon with Latin American antiquity, which is really exciting. But so the primary focus is several ritual events associated with the construction phases of an architectural complex at the site. Specific focus is on structure 9, which can be seen on this slide. So this pyramid, I have the height listed in here somewhere. But back in 2023 and 2024, stop pointing on me. Oh, I'm supposed to.
No, not working. It's always something.
Can you point that?
Yeah, good.
This is actually a beautiful pyramid underneath all these trees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, it's working again. But I just have to point with my hands.
No, use the point. Doesn't the pointer work? Use the green.
I wasn't getting the, where's the no laser pointer.
Batteries ran out.
Her fingers still work.
I'll give you a pointer. Wow.
Think UFOs.
This beautiful pyramid.
See?
Ooh,
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a fancy pointer.
Where's that pyramid? There it is.
Pyramid, I'll show some photos from the actual excavation. In Guatemala, a lot of the pyramids are covered over in vegetation now, because they've been left there for 2,000 years. In this case, this one was abandoned around 200 AD, so 1800 years ago, which is really neat. And the trees actually do quite a bit of damage when they fall over. They end up ripping off some, but they do a good job of preserving it for the most part. Okay, cool. So I end up using memory, which is a social practice intimately bound up by the relations people develop with one another and the world around them through what they do, where and how they do it, and with whom or what, and results in physical traces that make up the archaeological record. So social memory is a lived memory that's held by any number of individuals. It's commonly shared by a group. It's an active, ongoing process that is social, yet also tied to materiality, and thus is constructed, shaped, and mediated by its social and historic context. Additionally, it transcends the lifespan of any individual. So social memory can be embedded in material remains such as caches. So we also have caches in Georgia archaeology. They're really splendid, spectacular with the Maya. So here the term cache refers to a grouping of objects that were intentionally interred as an offering. There are also the material remains that accompany rituals involving the consecration of space. So in this case, someone dug through a surface and then they ended up putting a bunch of pots that were filled with water, represent that. And then it was covered over by another layer of construction at a later point. So the ancient Maya participated in a tradition of interring ritual deposit into previous phases of construction, which included plaza floors. Due to the location of these caches, they are largely invisible to archaeologists, and they are discovered through excavation. The interment of caches frequently accompanied the construction of new phases of architecture and served as ritual activities and forms of commemoration that corresponded to the sacred place and the maintenance of social memory. Ritual caches were also commonly placed in several different contexts, which included public plazas, ceremonial structures, and occasionally domestic buildings. So social memory can be a useful tool to examine monumental architecture and caches placed within them. So I'm looking at the site of Cival, which is located in this section of Guatemala, specifically right here. It's along the site of the border with Melchoramencos. So here's the site of Cival. It's located along the Holmul River. Ooh. It's actually fun. It's a very isolated site to get there, but you have to leave Melchoramencos and then travel in a truck on dirt roads in a private protected forest. That took me 3 hours to get to Cival. When I was working at Wood Snow, we'd get 5 hours. So we'd go in the dry season, which was great because the roads are good. And then we'd leave when the rainy season started, which would take sometimes upward, one time 10 hours to get out because we got stuck. The car broke. We had, at one point we replaced an axle with a stick. I don't even know how it worked. It was brilliant.
So what town were you going to, or going from?
Right here.
And what town is that?
It was Melchoramencos. So we'd end up just driving into this area and then getting stuck. So my favorite part, what I love to tell people is, so I'm from the north. I'm from Boston. Then I spent time in Buffalo. So I didn't really understand the fear of snakes so much. But the first time I was working at Cival in 2013, my first year there, I asked about the snake pit because people were like, you should ask about snake pit. The anti-venom we had was 5 years old. And it wasn't even at my camp. It was at the Holmul camp. So they told me if I get bit by a snake, I'm not making it alive. He was a bit of an unorthodox field director. I think a lot more field schools are a lot safer than that was. Yet somehow, for some reason, I went back 4 more times.
Never found the snake though, huh?
Oh, my workers did. They had their machetes and they would be like, oh yeah, we found a barba, and
Yeah.
they'd hold up some of like the snakes to show me. Why are you risking your life with like a cobra? Oh my God, a cobra. So Cival was a pre-classic period Maya ceremonial center that flourished between 900 AD and 300 AD, which corresponds to what we call the middle and late pre-classic periods. I was too impatient. So here is the map of Cival. It's actually quite a big site. And if you notice this little line here, we'll come back to that. It's quite interesting. Here's the center of Cival. So I'm specifically talking about the central E group plaza. So if you knew anything about the Maya, there's a big thing, this ritual complex called E groups. They have astronomical significance. Specifically, you have a western radial pyramid overlooking an eastern elongated platform surrounded by a plaza, and they're connected on an east-west axis. There's actually 5 at this site, which is crazy. But the idea is that standing on the top of this pyramid or standing at various points in the pyramid, you should be able to see the summer solstice, the fall solstice, no, the winter solstice, and the equinox, one of the equinoxes. So there's been a lot of focus on E groups in general regarding Maya, especially during this time period. So this site's quite interesting because it's one of the older sites in the Maya region. 900 is an early time period for the Maya lowlands. And in particular, this is the core of the site. This is where it began. So prior to 900 BC, the land surrounding Cival was first occupied by semi-nomadic and sedentary, sparsely distributed agricultural groups. By 850 to 800 BC, the site experienced its first phase of monumental construction, which included the process of modifying 2 hill knolls and filling in this plaza with up to like 30 feet of fill. So putting stone to connect these 2 hilltops together, and creating a level area of 500 meters square. So the 2 platforms, structure 9 and structure 7 and structure 9, were on modified hill knolls and were carved into the natural rise of the bedrock. They formed the first and central E group complex at Cival. So I mentioned the astronomical significance of E groups, but they also had they were just the center of early community centers. This plaza could fit most of the population in at that time, which would have been 10,000 people. And you could have ceremonies here. You could have public activities. Not enough plaza studies have been done. I'm curious if it served as a marketplace sometimes. Different things. So what's so unique about this building and with Maya architecture in general is, for some reason, although this structure received 5 to 6 phases of construction, they always maintained the same size of the plaza. And that led to some interesting construction phases, as I'll get to. So even though structure 9 and 7 were enlarged multiple times, the plaza always remained the same. The preservation of the original plaza size required the mutilation of the previous architectural phase. And this restricted growth resulted in multiple phases being built directly on top of each other, kind of like nesting dolls. And excavations at Cival's E group revealed evidence of a plethora of rituals in both the plaza and structure 9. These rituals demonstrate how the complex was an elaborate display of placemaking in an essential locale of social memory. So here is the remains of the eastern elongated platform. Here you can see a saber tree. It's really neat because it's seen as representing the different tiers of the Maya. So you have the roots, the underground, up to the branches that are really neat and spread out, kind of like an overworld. And then the bark, that part. But what's really cool is the roots. They come out of the ground and they create, since they're above the ground, they often create little pockets where water can be held. So animals love to drink from these. In particular, I want you to focus here because I will show in the next slide But one of the clearest examples of a ritual cache that ties together the theories of sacred place and social memory was the middle pre-classic period cruciform cache discovered in the central E group plaza at Cival. And it's actually one of only 2 Maya sites that actually have had this cruciform cache. Just crazy. So I don't have the full image of it in its glory. Well, this is what they found when they uncovered it. So they went down to the very beginning of the plaza creation. Someone put a cache where they filled up 5 big vases of water. And then they put, I believe, 500 greenstone pieces, so jade, at the bottom, along with several celts, so elongated stone. Wish I had a picture of it. But what was really neat about it is it's on a tiered level. So it's just a quadripartite where it has all these different steps in it that were carved into the bedrock. What was also really neat is before it was covered up, they actually broke all the vases so the water filled the area. Which is neat. So it's spatially arranged in a cruciform shape with 4 tiers that were carved into the soft bedrock of the plaza. Afterwards, the plaza and deposit were coated in a layer of plaster and a wooden post was erected above the offering. So the site director discussed the cache as representing the quadripartite shape of the Maya universe and its axis mundi. The ancient Maya perceived their world as containing a horizontal division that was composed of 4 quarters and a center. Thus, the arrangement of the objects in the cruciform cache represented this quadripartite division and served to center the site of Cival around this cache. This offering was placed along the center line of the plaza and was positioned in front of the eastern elongated platform of Cival's E group complex. This act of ritual centering also transformed this plaza into a sacred place and essential locale for the maintenance and transformation of social memory. So the central E group plaza continued to be ritually recentered throughout the site's history with the interment of additional caches and the placement of stelae. There were 5 additional ritual deposits placed in proximity to the cruciform cache over a 1,000-year period. So stelae are stone monuments that the Maya would carve into them. Specifically, this one had the etchings of one of the earliest representations of a Maya king. And it did not have any writing, but stelae often have, these stone monuments often have Maya writing on them that talk about kings or dynasties, things like that. Quite neat. Okay. So although the rich history of caching in the central E group plaza at Cival is well established, nothing's been really published relating to caching or in general about structure 9, which is directly in front of the plaza and was the focus of this paper. So in 2013, I got to dig a tunnel into this pyramid. There was also an excavation above it. And then in 2014, I got to come back and work on this side. My first real archaeological excavation that I was doing phase 2 testing. So I was doing excavation stuff rather than just the shovel testing that what archaeology often is.
How big a crew did you have working with you?
I usually had like 6.
6. Mm-hmm.
It was great. I would be the only American, often the only woman. Like there might be the cooks in the camp might be women, or actually often women. But I barely spoke Spanish the first time I went out to the site. So I was in charge of working with 6 Guatemalans and I didn't speak much English. I was Spanish, so that was fun. I learned quick.
Yeah.
I'm very good at archaeology, talking about archaeology in Spanish. But as a result, my Spanish isn't great for like regular things, non-archaeological things. Just the problem when you go live in a jungle, you speak about archaeology.
Been there, done that.
Any problems?
So, yeah, between 2013 and 2014, 3 excavation units were open on the east and north side. I did the math for this and now, so I edited my document and I printed it out and I was all ready to go. And then I left it all in Stone Mountain. So I cannot tell you how high 18 meters is. someone,
It's,
it's almost 60 feet,
yeah.
but 60 feet is the height of this pyramid. So this is a confusing image. I am not going to discuss it too much, basically just showing the different phases of construction for this. What I'm more interested in showing, I guess I'll talk first about the construction of structure 9 involved stripping the topsoil of the pyramid and coated it in a thin layer of lime plaster. Then it was transformed into a radial pyramid. Start seeing a radial pyramid that was greater than 2 meters in height and had at least 6 terraces, but it underwent its largest expansion in the 3rd phase of construction, which dates to the beginning of the late preclassic period. During the 4th and 5th stages, it became a radial pyramid. Radial meaning it had staircases on all sides, on all 4 sides, and it had 2 masts on each side of the structure. So what I have here is a close-up of here. Basically, what I wanted to show is this is the 3rd layer of architecture. It was a carved marble. And then here's the 4th layer. It was stone held together with plaster, basically. And it would have been an outer block. And then here's the 5th phase of architecture. So it's really jammed on top of each other. So this pyramid wasn't getting taller, it was getting higher up with each of the plazas going out. If that makes sense. It's really interesting. Kind of see here the different phases kind of stacked on top of each other. I'll show more slides of it because it's really interesting. So I focus on the 4th and 5th phases of architecture. So here is the north side of the structure. But excavations on the east and north side of the structure revealed heavily mutilated masks and floors that contained evidence of fire damage. Due to the extensive damage, it was concluded that both masks were severely mutilated to make room for the 5th phase. So although it may not look like it, there was a mask here. We're able to find out based on the indentations. So these were stairs. I have these plaster stairs here. But this was a mask that was deliberately mutilated by the Maya before they did the next phase of construction, which, jumping ahead, but the 5th phase is up here, and there's a beautifully preserved mask here. But we'll get to that soon. Eastern side of the structure. Again, the drawings are hard to show, but unfortunately, I was young, and in 2013, I brought a regular camera, and quickly the humidity of the jungle destroyed the quality of it. So, like, look at that beautiful, clear, crystal clear photo. I had to publish this in an article, so I was like, I have nothing else. It just destroyed that camera pretty quick. So the eastern side of the pyramid, this is actually a tunnel in it. I really just want you to pay attention to this interesting cut in the floor where someone deliberately cut through the previous phase of construction so they could retrieve a cache. But so the eastern side of the pyramid had several caches. One cache was located to the west of the eastern mask, but it was empty. Another cache, cache 93, this guy, again, pointing here so I can show it, was discovered in a circular cut. So they made this deliberate cut, and then they had this little capstone. So, and then they also had a bowl here with a single jade bead in it. So what was really interesting is when we lifted up this stone, it went straight down to the first version of the building. So towards the north side of the cut was a hexagonal slab that had a hole in the center of it. Once the slab was removed, it revealed a vertical shaft that was full of loose dirt and ceramic fragments that extended 18 feet down to the first construction phase of structure 9. In general, good archaeology, you don't dig straight down. I did it twice with this guy. It was not safe. Not a safe thing to do. At the base of the deposit was a level bedrock surface that has a line of blocks along its southern edge with a specific orientation. So basically we dug down to the bottom of this vertical shaft and we found an indentation where a cache had been, but it was no longer there. We also found So here's the vertical shaft. It did not align with the tunnel that I had previously dug into it. Here's where the cache was, and there was just a random line of blocks. So it seems likely that this vertical shaft, after trying to figure out everything, that this vertical shaft seems to be the ancient Maya digging down to recover this cache item that was likely there as a foundation of the structure, that maybe it was a foundational ritual. And so this act of them coming back, not knowing where it was, but somehow still knowing where it was, because it was under so much architecture, that my co-author and I were suggesting that maybe there was a step, like over 800 years, they were able to remember where the site had been, maybe through oral history or something, that allowed them to then dig down exactly where they knew that the item was, and then took it out with them and then filled it. The interment of caches was a ritual activity that served to create place and solidify and alter social memory. Since ritual offerings were subsequently covered by a new floor or phase of architecture, caches were physically invisible, and their specific location only existed in the memory of the community, which was passed down through oral tradition and ceremony. Additionally, the site and the specific ritual practices associated with the placement of these caches were potentially part of a knowledge kept by elite religious specialists. Thus, the vertical cache found at Structure 9 at Cival can provide an example of how the physical placement of certain deposits were remembered across hundreds of years. So we also discovered the 5th phase of construction. Hence, we had to dig through it to get to the 4th, but yeah. And during the field season in 2013, we uncovered this mask. Can you tell it's a mask yet? It's heavily weathered. Some of this was actually at the surface, so that's why it's got the green moss growing on it. But here is the bottom of the mask. I'll show you what it should look like in a minute. And it's just weathered, heavily eroded and mutilated mask on the east side of the structure. Both the floor and the plaster covering the mask were burned. 2 caches were discovered near the remnants of the cache. The first deposit was found next to a retaining wall, and it contained 2 poorly preserved human bones, 2 teeth, and the fragment of a plate. This figured out that it was probably part of a dedicatory offering rather than a burial. And the second cache was found in a cut in the floor. It contained charcoal, several burnt and broken ceramics, a ceramic bead, and 4 greenstone beads. Now, can you kind of tell this is a mask? This is the best one we recovered. So the excavation unit on the north side of Structure 9 uncovered a weathered mask of the ancient Maya god Chop. So he's known for having these kind of drool mostly, or whiskers that come down off from his mouth. So here's his nose. Here's his eye here. This part goes to his nose, and there's his spindle ear. So he's got some sort of shell in his ear. So a shell-shaped ear and a long nose, diagnostic traits of the pre-classic rain deity Chak. Just fun. So a potential cache was located 1 meter to the left of the mask, but due to time constraints, it was unexplored. On both sides of the northern mask were a set of stairs. Can't see here, kind of see. And the whole unit was burned by fire. However, after ritually burning this mask, stairs, and floor, the ancient Maya carefully stacked stone around it to preserve it. This gets even weirder, but the fact that they destroyed the mask on the other side is kind of weird too. Like, why did they preserve this one? And this preservation served to protect the mask and allow the ancient Maya to begin a new phase of construction only 1 meter above the previous architecture. Now, the great thing, this poor nose was heavily damaged because there was a giant root right through here. So when we got there, massive root, which was fun to deal with. So now I bring it back here, you can actually see this root right here. This is where that beautiful mask was. And this is the area above it. So after this intentional act of preservation, the ancient Maya, so they had this part of the mask where the mask is up here. And it would have continued here, and then it would have continued down further. That's the 4th phase. So it would have gone out like that and gone down, and there would have been another mask. However, For some reason, they decided to just destroy the lower half of the fifth phase and reveal the mutilated mask of the fourth phase. Which is just really puzzling back in 2014. I didn't understand why they would have done that. And I have a better idea now. So the ancient Maya destroyed the lower half of the fifth phase, and a vertical cut was made that cuts down to this fourth phase. And then actually right here, which is fun, this is the beginning of the sixth phase. Those stairs are not well done. They were made by poor quality workmanship. So this intentional destruction was found only on the north side of the structure, not on the east. And it seems to have created more space for future construction. But it was hard to say with just this. Here you can see the mask would have gone out like this, and there would have been another mask above the fourth phase of architecture. I have stories about it. If there's time and people are interested, I do have a story about shock and closing this excavation unit up. But both the fourth and fifth phases of construction contain masks on the east and north side. So the final events associated with the fourth phase of construction included the mutilation of the architecture and the placement of the foundation cache, which retrieved some sort of, foundation item. The mask on the east side was heavily mutilated, while on the mask on the north side was destroyed. But at the end of the fifth period, the structure was again ritually burnt and experienced selective acts of preservation and destruction. So the mask on the east side of structure 9 was heavily mutilated and ritually burnt, but on the north side it was preserved. Whereas portions of the structure below the mask were destroyed. And there were 2 dedicatory or termination caches associated with this fifth phase. So it seems like this puzzling combination of preservation and destruction is likely connected to some sort of referential practice. Although the ancient Maya had destroyed a portion of the fifth phase and mutilated the mask on the eastern side of structure 9, they had also taken great care in preventing any further destruction to the north mask and its adjacent staircases. So the deliberate mutilation found on the east side of structure 9 does not make sense. They were trying to preserve the size of the plaza. They wanted to keep the plaza the same size. So all of the destruction that occurred on the western radial pyramid on the east side was really to cut back the pyramid and allow them to continue building and containing the same space in the plaza. For some reason, they found it very important to maintain the space in the plaza. So it's apparent that maintaining the initial size of the central E-group plaza in the eastern edge of structure 9 was more important to preserving the sacred place and social memory at Cival than the destruction of sections of the pyramid. It's less clear why the northern side of the structure also experienced deliberate mutilation. So excavation revealed there was little outward growth of the pyramid along its northern side between the fourth and fifth phases of construction. Very good with this. This one side. It's possible that during the late preclassic period, there was a decision to maintain the current size of structure 9, which may have been tied to the preservation of the pyramid as a sacred place and was part of a ritual more than a lack of resources. I do want to point out that the northern side of structure 9 does share a border with the ball court. So here's the Maya ball court. But there's another potential explanation. There. Okay. So it's significant that the ancient Maya residents of Cival chose to preserve the northern mask on the fifth phase of architecture, especially after mutilating the other masks and destroying the lower half of the fifth phase of construction. This mystery is even more fascinating when the broader context of Cival is explored. So between 150 to 300 AD, the city experienced conflict, which was part of a larger pattern of political and population collapse across the Maya area during the end of the preclassic period. This conflict resulted in the residents of the city building a wall with stone taken from nearby structures. So here is a stone wall that was being made from stone taken from some of the buildings, and then they were using palisades, so wooden sticks, to further protect, and they'd be nestled in with the wall to protect the city. It's interesting that they decided to only protect a portion of the city, but that may suggest that their attack was imminent. And the fact that they never completed it also indicates that they were probably attacked before the wall was completed. So yeah, it formed 3/4 of a circle around the site and measured 2 meters in height, so about 6 feet high without the palisade. And yeah, it only incorporated the monumental core of the city and the largest elite groups. So yeah, suggesting that it was attached when constructing these defenses. Evidently, the city was raided, and it's possible that this event coincided with the burning of the masts on the 5th phase of Structure 9. It's also plausible the eastern mast was mutilated by the invaders during this raid. In the years following the conflict, the ruler and elites of Cival began the final phase of construction on the central E-group complex. But the city was in shambles. It was losing power. It was losing people. The nearby center of Holmul was starting to become a dominant power. So the preservation of the northern mast on 5th phase of Structure 9 was likely a direct attempt to reestablish a connection with Cival's monumental past after a disruptive event. So if the eastern mast had been damaged by the raid, it's possible that residents decided to terminate it rather than preserve it. And they kept the northern mast because they wanted to try to connect back to that this building had been occupied for 1,000 years. If they could tie back to that building, maybe they can continue to preserve the legacy of Cival and get people to stay and, you know, continue to thrive as a city. The elite would also want this because they have a nice position there. So the elite seemed to select the central E-group complex for its political and religious significance dating back to the site's formation. So the 6th phase of the central E-group complex was not well constructed, and the renovation of Structure 9 was never finished, which indicated that the elite did not possess the same level of power prior to the conflict. You also have a bunch of plaza caches that are ritually deposited in the E-group's plaza at this time that are all positioned really close to each other, which is interesting. And it seems like it's trying to serve, like trying to reestablish this as a special place, an important place to the city. And this attempt at rejuvenating Cival was mildly successful, as some people remained at the site for another 100 years. But most of the population, most of the monumental architecture, most of the prestige of the city was gone after that raid. So after Cival was completely abandoned around 300 AD, the city of Holmul was flourishing under Teotihuacan affiliated dynasty. This beautiful mask, come back to it. So excavations conducted at the central E-group complex have revealed a wealth of information regarding its extensive ritual and ceremonial use. So the caching previously associated with the central E-group plaza demonstrated its importance as a sacred place and site of social memory. This new research on Structure 9 shows that it really seemed to serve as this central location that was important to trying to maintain maybe even the soul of the city and trying to tie back to some of these dynastic legacies. So together, these ritual practices demonstrated that the central E-group complex served as a sacred place and center of social memory for over 1,000 years. Just acknowledgements. Here I am in front of the mask back when I was 2024. Yeah. Okay.
Question.
Questions? Yes.
Questions?
I wanted to ask, during the 5 different layers, I guess, what was the time frame in between the layers approximately? I know you can't probably tell exactly, but
Roughly 200 years. So 800, 600. Yeah.
The 5 layers, was there any correlation between those 5 layers of construction and the Mayan calendar?
Now, I think, so at least the first 2 were definitely because, okay, here we established this as a community. And then the second phase is, oh, we're actually doing well now. We're going to make it look nicer. And then the third phase is, oh, we have even more resources. But it doesn't seem to, it's hard to date things really well. We have different ceramic types that can tell us, oh, this is definitely an earlier period and this one's a little later, but for some reason, we just weren't able to get enough detail to figure out if it was related to the calendar or not.
I know you probably mentioned what the purpose of a cache was. I'm still trying to figure that out. Is that like a time capsule?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a time capsule in simplified terms of just that when they formed the site, they left something behind. And
What was in the caches?
Just
That
the
wasn't
broken
there.
pots, right?
well, in one of the cache in the plaza had a bunch of broken pots and greenstone. There was another cache that was located off in a different location on the edge of the plaza that contained maybe an important elite who died during the construction of it all. But that's the mystery of the one in the pyramid, because we have no idea what it was, but it was obviously important enough that they came back for it 700 years later. Which is interesting that it was just a 700-year different distance time that they came back to it. We'll never know what it really is.
It's a lot of generations.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
hard to pass that along accurately.
And I don't know how they did it. Because it was only like this big, the tunnel in.
Generations considered like 20 years,
Yeah.
700 years.
You know, many societies that are not literate transmit information for many generations orally, from mother to daughter to father to son, so grandparents down.
Even more, especially more accurately than we do now. It's kind of
Yeah, I
crazy.
think so.
When you didn't have writing, you had better memory.
Well, that's like, what's the Odyssey, Homer's, it was all oral. They didn't have anything written down. And then somebody wrote it down one day.
It's crazy. Yes?
The Maya actually did have, right? They
Yes.
just used temporary mediums that didn't survive the 2,000 years.
The pre-classic is what I focus on. The pre-classic didn't really seem to, writing wasn't there really till like 250 BCE. So a lot of my work doesn't touch on the Maya writing because there is writing going on in the larger area, and you could say maybe some of the larger outcrops of like the Azapa area has some sort of early writing that we haven't been able to figure out yet. But when the Maya hit the classic period, that's when their writing exploded. And we find so much writing on vessels, pottery, so much writing on these stone monuments or these stelae. It's really crazy. But I've always been interested in how societies form. So I was never really interested in the Maya writing so much. But there's still so much we've learned and so much we've lost because of the Spanish.
Michelle on Zoom asks, how do you know that the caches were deliberately dug up?
Well, in the fact of this foundational cache, the fact that there was nothing there. Usually when we find caches, we find them intact. So when we dig, so basically when you're digging, you're like, I'm gonna dig this spot in a plaza. And then suddenly you come across some sort of broken area. If you dig into it and you're like, oh, I found a bunch of human bones here, some pottery, some jade. I think this is a cache. It's still there, it's still intact. The Maya had like another form. But it's largely, it's hard to tell when something was dug up as a cache. That's why I spent so much time trying to figure this out. Because it's just this indentation where it seems like something would have been held. And I feel like that's going to be the greatest criticism to my article, Latin American Antiquity, is just trying to figure out, well, could it have been something else?
Were most of the caches dug out of stone? So I mean, that would definitely indicate.
Yeah, this one was dug out of stone. Sometimes they're just dug into a previous phase of architecture. So there was a floor, and maybe there were a couple layers of floor underneath, and they would just dig into one of those layers of floors. Like a common, it's not really a cache, but they have cache burials found in some of the Maya houses, like residential houses, where there would be several floors in a residential building, and if someone was deemed important or something, some reason, you'd end up having people buried in the floor. So when we were excavating a house, suddenly we came across like a jagged area, which indicated that the floor had been torn up and someone had been placed underneath. They sent me away before they uncovered the burial. But they uncovered a burial there. So there's usually indications and it's usually untouched caches. Did that answer the question?
She said, thank you.
Okay.
I noticed on the drawing, there's a lot of different shapes and orientations of buildings. Did you find any that matched?
I know with this drawing, this is my first ever drawing. It's so beautiful. I had to draw 60 feet of a tunnel. It goes all the way down here. And I didn't know how to draw stone. This is connected to someone else's drawing who did a nicer job of stone. But I just had 60 feet of stone to draw. And all of this right here is stone.
Looks like stone.
It's just dirt and stone. But here's the first phase. It was a plastered marl, a plastered hill knoll. And then the second phase, you can kind of see some stuff here. And then the third phase, fourth phase, and fifth phase are all bundled together. And it was 60 feet, so we had a cable and a light here. So it was great me trying to photograph all of it with like a single light source.
This tunnel,
I could, at points I could stand up.
2 meters is it?
Yeah, most of us had to crawl through it.
Had that site been looted before?
Yes, but not this pyramid, not this part. We would have found some sort of looter tunnel, but they seemed to target the areas, like there was a nicer. Get there eventually. There was a lot of looting in areas where looters thought they would find bodies. And so, like there were looter tunnels here where they found some beautiful maps, but the excavations in this triadic group, really dangerous because of all the looting they had done. So entering it in and trying to remove dirt would sometimes make it unstable. We actually had a cave-in. No one was in it, but they were looking for the elite groups to try to find, and a lot of the tunnel looters pits were in like the single, there's one here, one here, one here, but they left this Western radial pyramid alone for some reason.
How long has this, this town or this Maya city been, known and excavated?
Since 2002, but the Home Hole Archaeological Project doesn't do a ton of work there. It's maybe done 10 years of excavation there, even though it's been around.
The
for a
whole
long time.
town?
They've done excavations, like the year I was there, they did an excavation there. They did a series of excavations here, some excavations here. It just chooses buildings and then they have a whole season focusing on that building.
When did you say it was discovered?
Around like 2002.
So just 20 years ago, they didn't even know this existed? Or at
I
least-
mean, the looters probably did.
Yeah.
But archaeologists didn't. There's still so many sites like that. That are just, I mean, they're either known to the locals or they're known to the looters. But it's hard to find them sometimes. This is why like LiDAR studies have been really cool. You've been able to kind of peel back the jungle so you can see what's underneath.
Was this site found by LiDAR?
Now this was beforehand. They found it by good old trekking on foot.
Must have been something to come up to it for the first time.
And then to draw this all by hand back in the day.
Dodging snakes.
Dodging snakes.
That's a lot of work on that map just in itself.
So much. That's why I had to make a simplified version.
Yeah.
My dissertation.
Sure.
So all those structures have a vertical axis? And they're different heights?
Yeah. This guy. Oh, too many stories. This guy was a bit bigger than this, so he was maybe 70 feet tall, so almost 60 feet tall. This platform to get up to it was already like 30 feet tall to get up to that platform. So,
Was this whole site pretty flat or was it evenly hills?
so when it was originally found, it was 2 hills right here. And they filled that all in, 50 meters squared. Some of the area had been filled in. They did a lot of work to fill it in, upwards of several feet of fill. Yes.
So you mentioned that there was a story to go along with one of the maps.
Yeah, it's just a silly one. So the rainy season was coming and we were trying to finish this up. And I just found it funny that it was several days into the rainy season and it hadn't rained at all. And then as soon as we begin covering the mask up on our last day, it starts downpouring. Oh, that's funny. It's chalk is the god of rain. And we're covering it back up. It rains.
Are there any water courses?
There was seasonal swamps, a lot of seasonal swamps where water would be stored. I never really got to see it, but apparently there was a reservoir somewhere around here. But it was all filled in. They had done an excavation in it to try to see if the land was lower. And they had found a reservoir to store some of the water, since in the Maya region, in this part of the Baten, or the lower Maya lowlands, central Maya lowlands, there you'd have 6 months of rain and then you'd have 6 months of nothing. So surviving those 6 months were a little bit harder. That's why you need those water collection. Of course, the environment's a little different. It would have been a little bit more wet back then. My exciting days in Guatemala. I mean, Georgia's pretty exciting sometimes. Independent farms.
So you were there 2 seasons then?
I was at this site for 2
13 and
seasons.
14.
Yep. And then at another site, 2018 and 19.
Are you gonna go back? You just can't get the time.
I don't know about the time ever, but it was fun. I loved the culture. I loved the people. I loved the archaeology. It is nice to be surrounded by people who speak English with me all the time and not be the only one of 2 women when there's 60 people. That's nice too.
You said something about it being swampy conditions?
Yes.
In the wet season, was there chance of it being in a flood area?
Oh, so 2014 was really wet and really bad. And our access route to get out was cut off by a river. So some of the crew had to leave exactly that, like during that river. And before we had set up a raft to get back and forth, we had a raft crossing the river and the pond so we could actually get food brought to us, because we'd only get food brought in twice a week. And there were like 3 people who really needed to get back home to see their kids. So they had to hold on to a rope and walk through fast moving water to cross the river to get home. And I saw the pictures. It was horrible. I thankfully was a grad student at that time and I could spend another week or 2. So I waited till the floodwaters receded and I could safely get out on a truck.
But what, you think the site itself would have flooded periodically possibly?
It was high enough that I wouldn't have. It was on hilltops. It was really where the camp was that flooded. We were right by a seasonal swamp where we would get back water from the pond and have to look at alligators with our back water.
Okay, from Samuel Jones on Zoom. He asks, when Ian Graham mapped this area in 1984, It was said to have been named after the local word for lagoon. Is there a lagoon near the site?
Yes.
Failed to note this when the map was first shown.
Yes, excellent point. I forgot that it was mapped in 18. So I guess it's 40 years old. I know the home rule project didn't start excavating until 2002. But Cival is Civali. So the camp is a 30-minute walk to the site, but the camp is right next to that pond that I was talking about, which is the lagoon. So the site is named after this lagoon. The Maya word for lagoon. And I got to take showers in that swamp water, lagoon water. It's my favorite part of taking baths. Taking bucket showers where you have a bucket full of water and a cup so you can pretend like you're getting a shower when it was raining. So I'd be out in a little cubicle, sheltered on all sides, but rain coming on me as I'm trying to also wash myself with swamp water. Things you do when you're younger.
Yeah, tell me.
Like the first 2 years I had no internet connection. I was like, bye husband, bye parents, I'll see you in 2 months. I'm like, you come back and it's, oh, I had a cousin who went missing for a whole month. But I didn't know any of that drama because I came back and she was already found. And there's scary things when you like get cut off from the world.
Sam says, that's so cool. Thanks for answering. Any other
Other,
questions?
other questions?
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Kate.